even quantum computing can be used by bad actors, right? And then I believe that being quantum safe is one of the conversations is probably happening in the boardrooms right now, or will come up slowly and steadily. So what does it actually mean to be quantum safe for organizations?
I think if you think about that for your quantum safe journey, the clock's ticking, right? My main message to your listeners would be to just get ready now from a security perspective and get skills now. Being quantum safe means taking measures in your organization to understand where your data is, understand where traditional encryption methods are being used, so that you can pinpoint all these things, so that once quantum is a reality, you can then quickly adopt and pivot, like we do today, but it's going to be even of more importance in the future.
Welcome to Discover Dialogues podcast, powered by TechDogs. The world of business and technology is evolving at breakneck speed. AI breakthroughs, digital transformation, and game-changing innovations are reshaping industries every day. On this show, we dive into the trends, ideas, and strategies driving the future. We're sitting down with industry leaders, innovators, and disruptors to bring you fresh insights, bold perspectives, and real conversations that matter. So plug in, tune in, and let's discover what's next.
Today on the show, we have Orlagh Neary, quantum and AI leader and board member at Cambion Futures, where she helps global organizations prepare for emerging technologies through ecosystem strategy, thought leadership, and GTM innovation. With over 25 years of experience leading transformative initiatives at Microsoft, including programs like Quantum Ready and the launch of Majorana 1, Orlagh brings a rare ability to connect deep tech with real-world business impact. Let's dive in.
Welcome to another episode of Discover Dialogues, Orlagh. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Hey, Nikhil, how are you and the team?
We are good, doing good, perfectly fine. Thank you so much for asking that, Orlagh. I know it's been a pleasure to have you on a show today, and I'm sure that's going to be a very great conversation that we're going to be having on quantum computing, AI, and LLMs all together, and how the industry is moving and what all tech is going to create revolution. So it's a pleasure to have you all with us on a show today. And when I was researching about your experience, on your profile, so Orlagh, I saw that you've worn many hats, right from marketing to sales ops. You've also done some speech writing. You've worked into engineering as well, yeah, and now quantum computing. And also you're leading the quantum go-to-market strategies, right? And when your career, it does not have a roadmap, let's say. So my first question to you would be: so you've gone from leading localization teams to shaping go-to-market strategy for some of the most advanced technologies today. What has been the biggest mind shift, in this journey that you had for almost more than 3 decades?
Well, thanks, Nikhil. Yeah, my career has been wild, and for the last 20 years or so, I've spent my time at Microsoft, which has been fantastic. But yeah, I think early on in my career, I felt like I needed to know everything, and it was great, especially early on, like if there was already a playbook that I could learn from and whatnot. But I think the biggest mind shift for me, in particular in the last decade, was just getting really comfortable being really stupid. What I mean by that is like I've, jumped into things that I knew nothing about, especially nascent technologies and different shifts, right, in computing paradigms where I really didn't know much, but I had to learn, and I just had to get comfortable, with that, and then get comfortable making it up as I was going along. Now, thankfully, I've always been surrounded with a diverse set of folks and smart folks to learn from. But I think, the biggest thing and the biggest sort of growth I've had over the last decade is just really learning to be comfortable, not having that GPS, not really knowing, how to get to places, but really just really understanding where we're trying to get to and just going with it.
I mean, like learning never stops, it's always a learning. And, with technology evolving at such a rapid scale, I believe everybody has to be on tip of their toes, to adapt to that new technology, understand its business impact, get it ingrained into your workflows, and evolve with the technology so that you and technology can coherently evolve to make your business processes and professionally yourself, but also your organization also grows with the learnings that you might gain across the whole process of integrating a new technology, or whenever you're using a new technology basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think once you have that vision and you surround yourself with folks that can support you in that vision, whatever that is, like your personal life or your professional life, things are just that much easier. But, I do think it takes a fair bit of resilience uh,
Uh-huh.
to be willing to put yourself out there personally and
Uh-huh.
professionally, to try new things, to learn new
Mm-hmm.
things, kind of
Mm-hmm.
get okay with failing as
Mm-hmm.
well, but just picking
Mm-hmm.
yourself up, picking your team up, learning
Uh-huh.
from it, and moving on. So a little bit of resilience and a bit of fun goes a long way.
Definitely, in terms of, when you said, being surrounded around with the right folks, right? I believe the ecosystem that you work in, or, you blend in, basically helps to shape you professionally, personally, at both the levels, right? And the resilience is what I feel is very important, right? The whole ability to go out and explore new things, that curiosity should be there in for you to learn always, so that you can ensure that you're growing personally as well and professionally as well. But you also mentioned that when you started the whole, and when you were the mind shift that you happened, right, for you, you were afraid of looking a bit foolish in the earlier days, if I must
Yeah.
say. So was there a time when you pitched something that felt wild at the time when you're pitching it, but later on you realize that, oh, it was a breakthrough, it turned out to be a big breakthrough for you?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just chatting with one of the former vice presidents at Microsoft, the first
Uh-huh.
vice president I worked under.
Uh-huh.
And when I first started working on that team, I inherited it was a localization engineering project, and I
Uh-huh.
inherited this budget estimate for how much it was going to take to localize
Uh-huh.
e-learning into 10, 15 languages. And at the time, it was full of Adobe Flash files, which were really hard to localize if they weren't developed with globalization or
Uh-huh.
localization in mind. And so I was the bearer of a little bit of bad news to him, which was, yeah, the estimate that was previously done, we probably need to 5x that. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to work really hard to figure out
Mm-hmm.
new ways in which we can cut costs or be more efficient so that we can get this to market faster. And so I introduced this notion, I'd worked on it in the past, of using AI, like in the early days, machine translation, to
Mm-hmm.
help translators speed up the translation process.
Uh-huh.
And I think at the time it was like wild to be even suggesting something like that in a mainstream, localization engineering process. But,
Mm-hmm.
that vice president was like, okay, I hear you. He didn't shoot the messenger. He said, okay, I believe you. Go ahead and do what you need to do and just share regular updates with me. And
Mm-hmm.
it didn't work out exactly as planned, but it did go a lot. The new processes that the team created and the new technology that we embraced, it
Mm-hmm.
really did help us,
Uh-huh.
create, I think, better versions of the English product than we were originally starting off with. So it was
Mm-hmm.
fun, but it was a little scary to then walk out of that room going, oh, geez, I got to go do what I said I was going to go do. But, that invigorates you too, like
Uh-huh.
sometimes I think if I look back at my career at Microsoft, I think
Mm-hmm.
some of the highlights were at the time some of the scariest moments I've had,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
where your adrenaline is flowing in the meetings,
Uh-huh.
and just, with your team.
Uh-huh.
But definitely a ton of learning from those scary moments when you think you really don't know what you're talking about, or you think you do, but you don't really.
Definitely. So, what I hear is, basically, your willingness to step into the unknown gave you an first mover advantage or a competitive edge as a go to market leader in an emerging tech, right? Because
I think, the early experimentation with AI and the localization processes, yeah, I agree. I have always been fascinated with AI, like from my college days
Mhm,
when I first learned about it.
mhm,
But I also think that, humans have to be in the loop. And so with
definitely.
with the translation, technology, the translator was still the star of the show because you have
Uh-huh.
to got to put that human spin on it. And,
Mhm,
the language models weren't as advanced, 30 odd years
mhm,
ago as they are today. But regardless of the advances in AI, I think it's just super important to keep humans in the loop. And, humans, we are all learning, from AI,
mhm,
from new technology.
mhm,
Like even think, like now I'm starting to think about like data. Like so at 10, 15 years ago,
mhm,
maybe when we were
mhm,
working on the migration of
mhm,
on-premise data to the cloud and working with customers to,
mhm,
talk to them about the value prop of moving to the cloud. And
mhm,
if you moved your data to the cloud, then of course you could take advantage of the new innovation that was going to come, like AI today. And so
mhm,
I think it's scary for customers to be first. It really
mhm,
is. It's scary
mhm,
for you when you're experimenting on your own teams to
mhm,
be first. But the rewards definitely are there to be reaped if you can move
mhm.
first and create, like you said, that competitive advantage, Nikhil.
So I know I'm going to drift away from the topic, which we're going to get in for sure. But there's a lot of hype about, because you said that you've been exposed to AI since your college days, right? And there's a lot of hype there's a lot of noise happening around that, will AI replace your job or enhance it, right? So what is your take on it? And definitely your point that humans should be in the loop because
Yeah.
that verification and ensuring that AI is behaving in the way it is expected to. That's where human in loop is important. But what's your take on will AI will take your job or will enhance it?
Honestly, probably both.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain tasks that AI is just getting better and better
Uh-huh.
at. And so, yeah, there are certain activities that I think you can delegate to AI to perform
Mm-hmm.
for you, whilst you then also have an opportunity to do something else, do
Mm-hmm.
something that AI really can't do. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's both replace and augment, actually.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
And at least that's been my experience, like with ChatGPT, exploding.
Mm-hmm.
I use it, in my personal life,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a tool, right? It's AI is just that, and it doesn't. It's not necessarily a tool that you use for everything. So
Mm-hmm.
I think in terms of the hype that's out there, it's like, oh
Uh-huh.
yeah, you're gonna use AI, and then then these problems that
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to solve, they're automatically gonna get solved. And
Uh-huh.
that's not necessarily the case. Like you got to really take a planful approach to
Mm-hmm.
figuring out how to use the tool
Uh-huh.
and what outcome you tangible outcome you're looking
Mm-hmm.
for. So with that in mind, I think humans are always need to be in the loop to figure that out.
And we've already spoken about finding out new ways, creating your new ways, and forging new paths, basically to where you have to reach, right? And when I look at your career, you've not only embraced ambiguity, but also you've went out of your way, to ensure that you deliver what you've been expected to deliver. So and you've built go-to market strategies when AI, quantum computing, and LLMs were not they were not coexisting, right? They were treated as independent emerging technologies, right? So let's unpack that a little, right?
Okay.
So so many organizations actually see quantum computing, AI and LLMs as a different part of technology, as a can they treat them as separate lanes, if I must say, right? So, but you always talk about the symbiotic relationship between all of these three technologies, right? So, can you please walk us through this relationship that all of these technologies have together?
And last night, I was thinking because we were chatting, earlier, Nikhil,
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking last night, well, how best could I explain how I think about all of this? And
Uh-huh.
over Mother's Day weekend here in the States, I went to
Uh-huh.
see the Avengers Thunderbolts movie
Uh-huh.
with my two boys.
Uh-huh.
And so last night I was thinking, well, that's sort of it. That's kind of how I think about it. Like each character in an Avengers movie, has all these powers that are
Mm-hmm.
amazing, themselves.
Uh-huh.
Iron Man, Captain America, whoever, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, but the magic of the Avengers, or the magic of Thunderbolts, was in figuring out how to work together as a team, right, and how to
Mm-hmm.
communicate together as a team. And so I think the same is sort of true for AI,
Mm-hmm.
and then LLMs as a subset of AI, and quantum. So maybe let's take a crack at it. So like AI, for example, super cool
Mm-hmm.
um, at sifting through tons and tons of data. Like it's a really great detective, right?
Mm-hmm.
It helps us identify patterns. It helps identify, helps us connect dots. It
Mm-hmm.
just, it works on massive, massive, massive data sets. So it's definitely, I think about it more like a detective. An LLM, being a subset of AI, it's like if you think about AI as the brain, the LLMs is the language component of the brain. So it really helps
Mm-hmm.
translate these detectives' findings, or all the intelligence from AI,
Mm-hmm.
into like plain speak, right, for us, where we can more easily digest the
Uh-huh.
insights gleaned through AI. It helps us,
Uh-huh.
ask better questions, and it really, it facilitates curiosity. So even thinking back to the earlier question you asked about me, about the replacements, like it's just a symbiotic relationship now between humans and AI, where I don't think it's gonna make people get dumber, because I know that's another thing that's
Uh-huh.
out there, right? Is like, oh, it's going to take away human ingenuity, creativity. There's merit to starting with a blank sheet of paper and not asking ChatGPT, Claude, whatever it is, to give you some things. But at the same time, if you're curious, it helps us deepen. Now you got to be careful and not
Mm-hmm.
use, just what it spits out, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
AI can hallucinate too,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes even humans, when we read things, if we don't go to the nth degree to figure out what's true and
Uh-huh.
what's not true, then we may end up, perpetuating false truths. So, you got to be careful, right? But definitely LLMs have really helped unlock AI's
Mm-hmm.
potential for tons of folks, because it has the ability to help us understand in plain language what the AI insights are. Now you layer quantum on top of it. I think about quantum
Mm-hmm.
more like the explorer working with the translator and the detective. A
Mm-hmm.
bit like Star Trek Enterprise, it's going to help us go boldly where no classical computer can go before, because quantum computing has the ability to really mimic nature, because it has the ability to really get down to the atomic or molecular
Mm-hmm.
level. And so, it can help us mimic how drugs, right, are going to react together and whatnot. And so if you put all those three, if you use each one of them, yeah, fantastic. But you think about how you work all of those together, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a ton of potential that we can help unlock. And I think it's not just science fiction like the Avengers. It's happening today, like in go to markets that I've had the pleasure to work on. We're working with pharma, we're working with manufacturing, we're working
Mm-hmm.
with other sectors on how you
Mm-hmm.
can uh, uh, create this dream team advantage
Uh-huh.
for your organizations. Now that said, like I don't want to hype quantum or anything like that. It's very early stages, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, quantum data is also helping train AI, right? So
Mm-hmm.
AI is based on historical data that already exists.
Mm-hmm.
But quantum can create synthetic data based on what you're exploring. And that synthetic data can help train the AI, which then
Uh-huh.
LLMs, like I think Biogen, ChatGPT is out there. It can help us translate, those findings. So it is this virtuous symbiotic relationship
Uh-huh.
that I like to talk about, at least.
Definitely, you called AI as the detector, LLMs as the translator, and quantum as the explorer. That's a vivid metaphor. And and that one question I would like to ask over here is because, do you think that, enterprises are still trying to compartmentalize these technologies, or have they starting realizing the symbiotic relationship all these technologies have? And like, what is the current scenario in the industry?
Very early days, and I don't think
Mm-hmm.
there's widespread
Mm-hmm.
adoption of
Mm-hmm.
quantum technology, quantum
Mm-hmm.
algorithm, quantum inspired.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was working at Microsoft, and we worked on a program called Quantum Ready,
Mm-hmm.
where we decided to help business audiences understand what quantum was about, we did some
Mm-hmm.
research, and it looked like from that research, I think it was Boston Consulting Group, is where we
Mm-hmm.
got research from. But I think if I remember it properly, it was about 90% of BDM surveyed weren't really thinking about quantum. Everybody's really
Mm-hmm.
focused on AI. Sort of
Uh-huh.
reminds me, takes me back to 10, 15 years ago, where even though AI was emerging, the
Mm-hmm.
conversation and the focus that organizations has was
Mm-hmm.
on data transformation or digital
Mm-hmm.
transformation, like understanding where all your data assets were, and organizing your data estate.
Mm-hmm.
And those conversations were critical, right? To help then introduce AI. And I think now we're sort of at that stage with quantum, where organizations are very, very focused on AI.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but hopefully with education and more awareness out there in the market, more BDMs will be able to get educated and then help carve new pathways in their organization. Like this year, for example, is the International Year of Quantum declared by
Mm-hmm. Okay.
UNESCO. And there's a massive campaign around the world to educate all types of audiences on
Mm-hmm.
quantum, what it is. And yes, it's still that weird science, a little bit science fiction. But given the breakthroughs because of AI that scientists are able to have with quantum, the quantum future where we can have that dream team come together is getting earlier and earlier than maybe once thought. And so I think important now that we try and build that awareness with organizations, with individuals, help get organizations skilled with the talent that
Mm-hmm.
is going to be necessary to take advantage of this dream team. Wow, when it becomes more and more of a reality.
We've been discussing about this, in the previous responses as well, like businesses actually want tangible benefits of the technology that they've been integrating, right? And they only care about outcomes, right? And
Yeah,
in terms of quantum computing, they will not consider qubits, right? So
yeah.
how do you translate the dream state that you've been discussing narrative into a practical value, basically? And how do you even begin to message that interplay to a business audience, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do you start that conversation?
Yeah. Like in the early days of AI, when it was, there was a lot of tech jargon out there,
Mm-hmm.
we launched Microsoft's AI Business School,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which really started with the scenarios or the
Mm-hmm.
outcomes that we thought that customers are trying to solve for. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think with Quantum Ready, the team took a page
Mm-hmm.
out of that book too and started
Mm-hmm.
looking at, well, what are some scenarios and problems that are ripe
Mm-hmm.
for quantum AI and LLMs to
Mm-hmm.
work together to solve. And so you lead with those scenarios. So, like I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, one of them, right? It for pharma. So one of the biggest issues that the pharmaceutical industry faces is just how expensive it is to develop new drugs, to research new drugs. It's
Mm-hmm.
expensive. The research cycles are long. The
Mm-hmm.
promise, the quantum AI hold together is to speed up, not just speeding up drug discovery, but because quantum, really mimics nature and has the ability to get down to that most tiniest, like atomic level, it
Mm-hmm.
will help, simulate in a much faster and much more scalable way how new drugs could potentially perform. So you think about quantum being used to accelerate drug discovery, in a way that AI and HPC together cannot. But then, you can get to these candidates, right? And then AI can help us rank the candidates, rank the performance and whatnot. So together, with AI, HPC, quantum, once it becomes more and more available, you can imagine the speed to market for pharmaceutical companies will increase. Personalized medicine treatments, like one that I'm particularly, hopeful about, is my kids have something called retinal dystrophy, which is, it's like tunnel vision. So, and because it's a dystrophy, over time, their vision will potentially get progressively worse. Well, it's because of some, gene, right, mutation. And so perhaps, with quantum and AI working together as this dream team, in my lifetime, we'll see how, a retinal dystrophy can be either slowed down or, the genes manipulated. So I'm super hopeful for lots of different use cases. And just like AI, like there's no way, like, 10 years ago, my team or I could have imagined how, our organizations are leveraging AI to create value. And so quantum is, be mind-blowing, the scenarios that will be possible.
I hope, the pharmaceutical industry gets tremendously benefited with the symbiotic trio that we've been speaking about, because I believe there are a lot of innovations and inventions that could AI and quantum and LLMs all together put into, because there are a lot of people across the globe who would really get benefited out of, as you said, like pharma, right? And I guess aerospace is also another industry that can be greatly benefited out of the integration of all of these technologies together.
Yeah, absolutely. Like in aerospace, think about energy, right? And new types of fuel, new types of batteries, and then just even route optimization to help, maximize efficiencies too. Like all those will be possible. And actually, I think folks like Airbus are already working on early experimentation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've seen a lot of electrification that has been happening. I've even seen ships that are potentially exploring aeroplanes that could run on electricity, but that's a very fast stage that we have been looking at. But let's see, because it will try to reduce down on the carbon emission that's these logistics been having on the environment.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, as much as there's hype around the downside of these technologies, there's a lot of upside
Exactly.
that I think humanity can benefit. And that's what has always really excited me and drawn me to this space is particularly, when I worked for Microsoft, like that's a company that's focused on not just, creating innovation for innovation's sake. It's a company that's focused on putting that innovation into the hands of innovators to scale, right? And likewise, other organizations now in the quantum ecosystem, similar, with like Quantinuum, full stack, really focused on not just hoarding that innovation for themselves, but turning it over for customers to benefit from. Where like we talked about, new drug discovery, climate. The climate crisis that we see around the world, like imagine ways in which AI even today can help, but then AI and quantum in the future, it's going to be, I'm loving what the future holds for us.
Definitely. So, other than the aerospace and pharmaceutical, do you think there's any other industry that is greatly benefiting from the dream team that we've been discussing, or those industries that started exploring these options?
Well, we talked about pharma. I think manufacturing, right, is another one. If you think about new materials or even, batteries. We talked about automotive a little bit, BMW, finance potentially as well, right? If you think about different, like, narrow data sets, but with a ton of permutations. I can think of scenarios in the future there for finance that would be beneficial, to take a look at both AI and HPC, AI and quantum together. I think what else? Yeah, I think, like I said, like I can't even imagine all the different use cases out there. And I think that's why it's really important to get diverse perspectives, into the ecosystem to help figure out new use cases across existing industries. But hey, who knows, new industries that will pop up as well because of this symbiotic relationship.
Exactly. And, like to that point, because, right now, because there's a lot of noise in the emerging tech, then, there's always like, and if you speak the whole Gen Z language, the FOMO, right? The fear of missing out, right? Most of the enterprises actually feel that, they're missing out on something and they might integrate a shiny tech, or a tech that has not been really valuable for them, right? So because you've worked for the go-to-market strategies, right? So how do you create a balance between creating an urgency without overhyping the technology?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, Nikhil. I think it's like in Microsoft, at least when I worked there, we really focused on deeply understanding the problems that customers are trying to solve for. Because whilst yes, you could use AI, there are other potentially technologies that people could leverage to create those business outcomes in a better, more efficient way, depending. And so I think it's really just taking a step back and really understanding what outcome you're looking to drive, and then figuring out with this portfolio of innovation that we now have, like it's almost like an embarrassment of riches. Then which part of the stack do you need to light up? But it's not just a technology conversation either. It's also a cultural conversation within an organization, like creating the right culture in which you can experiment, in which diverse perspectives are valued, right? Because like if you think even about Microsoft and our quantum exploration, like we partner across the ecosystem with pharmaceutical companies, automotive companies, and whatnot, because those companies have the deep subject matter expertise that potentially Microsoft doesn't have. But likewise in organizations, right? If you think about the data scientists or the quantum scientists that are working, that are the technology experts, you got to bring the people from the organization that are expert in the processes to the table as well. And you got to create that culture in which those different perspectives are welcome, and create sort of safe spaces for those conversations, right? Like in the early days, and now even more so, folks were afraid to volunteer the processes because this fear, oh my gosh, I'm going to volunteer my process, or I'm going to volunteer all this information I have, and then am I going to be replaced? Well, no, right? Because that deep subject matter expertise is hugely valuable. So I think that focusing on a culture of innovation, super important. Focusing on a responsible innovation culture, also important, right? Like what are we going to use this technology for? Are we making sure that humans are in the loop, right? To because sometimes, a lot of times, right, the data that upon which models are trained is biased, right, in one way or the other. And so got to be, looking at that and be mindful of that, and making sure that you have processes built in that's going to check, for responsible innovation. And I think, another thing is to think about is security as well, right? Now and in the future, about how secure your assets are, and how folks aren't just thinking about security as a checkbox, but as a strategic imperative too, right? So I think, I covered a lot of ground there, but I think it's, focusing on educating and getting skilled on the technology, looking at the processes, looking at the culture you got to create, and then not thinking that AI or quantum is the panacea for everything. It may be, but it may not be. There may be better ways to go about solving your problems.
True. I mean, great responses you've given, and we've covered a lot in this response, because, a culture of innovation to embrace is a great point, right? But also the point that responsible culture of innovation. And the third thing we should to spoke about is security, right? And I believe that, with great powers comes great responsibilities, right? And
Yes, 100.
and quantum computing, any technology for that matter, as we spoke about, AI is a double-edged sword, right? Even quantum computing can be used by bad actors, right?
Yeah.
And if they use it, there are going to be threats, there are going to be risks, they're going to be, the security comes into picture. And then I believe that, being quantum safe is one of the conversations is probably happening in the boardrooms right now, or will come up slowly and steadily. So what does it actually mean to be quantum safe for organizations?
Okay, well, let's see. I think you're absolutely right, Nikhil. I think the conversation is coming up more and more, which is good because that means there's more awareness out there
Uh-huh.
around them, right? But as much value, as much potential there is to create
Mm-hmm.
value, the trio
Mm-hmm.
working together can also be used in the hands of bad actors
Mm-hmm.
um, to steal data, right? So if you think about today, there's a huge focus or in organizations on security, on really locking down the assets. But sometimes it's really, like we just talked about, a bit of a checkbox exercise. It's like an audit. But
Yeah.
just imagine like the financial data, healthcare data,
Mm-hmm.
or the data that is your value, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
secrets, right? Imagine that in the hands of
Mm-hmm.
bad actors, right? And so it's really important today that you take measures to secure your assets today, even
Mm-hmm.
with AI, but even more so when quantum becomes a reality. So for quantum safe, it means getting prepared for when quantum becomes a reality, because
Mm-hmm.
today's encryption methods, right, are
Mm-hmm.
just toast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once the dream team are working together, or the crazy team in this in this scenario, right?
Yeah.
So you really got to look for this. There's this term, right, in the industry, PQC, post quantum cryptography, right? So got
Mm-hmm.
to prepare for that, right? Got to prepare for this era where your assets are going to be under attack. And
Mm-hmm.
so it starts today. So being quantum safe means taking measures in your organization to understand where your data is, understand
Mm-hmm.
where traditional encryption methods are being used, so that you can pinpoint all these things, so that once quantum is a reality, you can then quickly adopt and pivot,
Mm-hmm.
like we do today. But it's going
Mm-hmm.
to be even of more importance in the future.
So do you think there's a timeline when do you think that quantum will become a reality, like, but everybody, is there any timeline that do you think that is going to be in place?
Well, there's a whole spectrum of opinions on that. Like it was earlier this year, I think Jensen from NVIDIA,
Mm-hmm.
he speculated that it was much further out than maybe people were imagining. And I think many of the startups and the ecosystems,
Mm-hmm.
saw their stock, plummet as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
But then, Microsoft, when the Quantum Ready program launched, we saw the stocks go back up.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just shows you just how nascent this technology is, in
Exactly.
so far as there's just wild perspectives. And
Uh-huh.
I think, you can get perspectives that puts it, 10, 15 years
Mm-hmm.
out, to more near term, which is where, folks like Microsoft, Continuum, and other big
Mm-hmm.
players in the ecosystem, put it. So I think most folks would say 2030 we'll begin to reap true quantum rewards. So I think if you think about that for your quantum safe journey,
Mm-hmm.
the clock's ticking, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
my main message to your listeners would be to just get ready now from a security perspective, and get
Mm-hmm.
skilled now, so that
Mm-hmm.
you're ready.
So you mentioned as 2030 as a realistic timeline for quantum to, even reap out benefits, or deliver tangible results to businesses, right? Uh, are there any specific sectors where the urgency is more higher? We spoke about finance, we spoke about healthcare, we spoke about government. Do you think any specific industry needs to, on priority implement or explore the opportunities
Yeah.
and meet the realistic deadline of 2030? So I mean, in another previous conversation that we had, earlier, so you had said that, if you're not safe today, you're not safe tomorrow, and that struck me, right? Stuck with me. So, what is the shift that you think leaders need to make right now in terms of being quantum safe? Uh,
I think maybe it would be helpful for organizations to think about it as more along the lines of future proofing their
mm-hmm,
organizations versus
mm-hmm,
it being more like a compliance or
mm-hmm,
auditing sort of thing. Like
mm-hmm,
it's not a checkbox item. It
mm-hmm,
needs to be a strategic imperative.
mm-hmm,
And when you make something a strategic imperative, you are future proofing your organization, whether
mm-hmm,
that's, you're making a strategic imperative to have, research as a
mm-hmm,
priority in organizations, where you have a priority to incubate, future
mm-hmm,
technologies that aren't necessarily making money or whatnot, alongside your mainstream business. So as much as you think of, as business leaders, think about those types of strategic imperatives and strategic priorities, I
mm-hmm.
think security rises to the top in terms of making sure that you're future proofing your organizations against value that could potentially be stolen from you.
So, how do you actually convince stakeholders, that this is actually a strategic investment and not just a checkbox or not just an insurance policy? Like, how do you break them
Yeah.
in these conversations?
Well, I think you mentioned it earlier and you're spot on. I think a little bit of FOMO goes a long way, right? So I typically will talk to organizations about other
Mm-hmm,
organizations that are similar to them that are, preparing for a quantum future, either
mm-hmm,
or both, by exploring how quantum will create new business value, but then
mm-hmm,
also getting ready for when quantum is more that scalable tool that
mm-hmm,
potentially can be used in the hands of bad actors, and showing organizations that are already, really seriously down a path of
uh-huh,
implementing a quantum safe roadmap. I'll help lead them to different technologies. Microsoft has a quantum safe program, Quantinuum, and others have their other
mm-hmm,
security solutions too. So the good news is that the ecosystem, whilst obviously there's a ton of competition out there, the quantum ecosystem, being so nascent, is working together to ensure that the offerings are out there for customers to use. So,
mm-hmm,
even talking about that to customers helps, because why would an organization invest in creating an offering, if it's neither here nor there?
uh-huh,
So I think a little bit of FOMO, injecting the urgency too,
mm-hmm.
is sometimes what I think works.
One of the biggest setbacks for AI right now, I believe, is the trust. People are not able to trust in the technology, or and that's why I guess the integration is somewhere dropping down. It's just because of the trust, because people are not trusting the black box model of generative AI.
Yeah.
That they want it to be more
They're
transparent.
more transparent, how is it making these decisions? Like, I love even just, my own personal use. When I use Claude or ChatGPT, you can see it thinking and you can see how it's getting to some of the responses to your questions. So it
Mm-hmm,
helps, that transparency, creates more trust. But
mm-hmm,
like I said as well before, like you gotta be measured in your trust of the AI
mm-hmm.
as well.
Yeah.
Um, you know.
So, Orla, these, there's a lot of discussions that happen around people, challenges in the businesses, then processes and partners, right? Which of these aspects do you think is one of the most overlooked aspects, all while integrating or, deploying a new technology?
Unfortunately, I think it's the people, right? So
Mm-hmm,
um, even today, right, if you look at AI, like
mm-hmm,
it needs different skill sets, right?
mm-hmm,
And there's a skills shortage
mm-hmm,
for organizations with people that are skilled in
mm-hmm,
using AI and thinking about AI. And so
mm-hmm,
I think, it's unfortunate, that we're in this place. We, didn't need
mm-hmm,
to be, but I think now, like
Mm-hmm.
for quantum, with like I talked about earlier with the International Year of Quantum and UNESCO, I think there's this effort now from governments and organizations
Mm-hmm.
to drive more awareness into the market to
Mm-hmm.
help with skilling. I was reading, when I was on holidays in Mexico about some of the investments that Qatar is making in quantum too, and where there's a whole
Mm-hmm.
skilling initiative going alongside it, which was exciting for me to see, right? It's not just this focus on technology, but it's a focus on skilling people. And, they're not, that government isn't
Mm-hmm.
alone. The governments around the world are now starting to invest in skilling. Universities have a role to play as well, and
Mm-hmm.
trade schools have a role to play. Like, the whole ecosystem working together is what we need to
Mm-hmm.
help create more
Yeah.
skilled labor that can help us really
Mm-hmm.
unlock the potential of quantum. And without, a diverse set of folks getting skilled and coming to the table
Mm-hmm.
to help solve these problems, then we won't be able to solve the problems. Like, the technology isn't going to solve the problems itself,
Mm-hmm.
we need humans to guide its use and to guide its
Exactly.
use against particular
Uh-huh.
scenarios, right? So,
Uh-huh.
so I think it's people, it's easy to get carried away with the new shiny object, but really, thinking about the tech and developing the tech and whatnot. But
Mm-hmm.
it's super important to focus on the people, not just the people that
Mm-hmm.
are creating,
Yeah.
the AI models, but the people who are using the models too.
Mm-hmm.
So the same is true of quantum, just getting really focused on
Mm-hmm.
educating your organizations is
Mm-hmm.
I think critical. And that's why Microsoft, launched Quantum Ready when I was
Mm-hmm.
on this.
Definitely, and that's a great perspective to put. Technology will not solve the problem itself. It's the people who are using the technology is going to solve the problem, right? And that helps me to form the next question for you. Is because do you think that leaders, because the skill gap also we have discussed, right? So do you think that enterprise leaders today sometimes overestimate how much technical readiness matters versus cultural and organizational readiness?
I think sometimes, sure,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? And so I think, as much as we saw with classical computing, with AI being
Mm-hmm.
underestimated, just how much investment was going to be needed to put your
Mm-hmm.
organizations in a position to be able to take advantage of AI, like even just starting with the data, like figuring out where your data is to be able to train the
Mm-hmm.
model, figuring out what types of AI are going to be the most
Mm-hmm.
useful, right? Because AI is a vast field. And so I think, as much as folks underestimated the investment in resources, dollars, and people, quantum is another paradigm shift in
Mm-hmm.
computing, a new way of thinking about how to
Mm-hmm.
solve problems. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yes, like I think, it'll be easy to underestimate just how much investment is required to take advantage of it, which is why it's important to start investing now in
Mm-hmm.
educating yourself,
Mm-hmm.
educating other business leaders in your organization
Mm-hmm.
around how quantum could potentially use, and start thinking about scenarios in which you can use it. If you can get ahead of that, then you're going to be in much better shape for sure.
For sure, Orla, and we've gone into deep discussion into alignment, business readiness, and strategy, right? And thank you so much for your insights. And I'm sure that now our audiences will be able to gather a lot of insights around quantum computing and, like how this, the dream state that you've been, the dream team that you've been discussing about, we will definitely have some valuable insights for audiences. But before we wrap today, let's shift some gears, right? Let the audience know what Orla is behind the go-to market engine with a little rapid fire. Please let me know when you're ready and we'll start.
Okay, I'm a little scared, but okay.
First question is: are you an early bird or a midnight brainstormer?
Oh, definitely late night. Yeah, definitely.
If you get to teleport anywhere for lunch, where are you going and what are you eating?
Ooh, I think I would teleport myself home to my hometown in Skerries. It's a little fishing village, or it used to be a little fishing village, just
Uh huh.
north of Dublin. And down on the harbour, there's a really cool pub. Your listeners should check it out if you get a chance to go to Ireland. It's called Stoops. It's been family run for generations.
And so, what's your guilty pleasure TV show or series that you binge watch?
I binge watched most recently is Bad Sisters on Apple TV, and it's a group of Irish sisters, and they're scheming and plotting all sorts of things. And I enjoyed it a lot.
So if you're stuck in a time loop, right, and let's say it's a perfect day, what's happening on that day?
Well, I love golf. Sometimes joke with everybody that I think, I'm finally going to make that career pivot to being on the LPGA tour.
And if you could master any non-work related skill, what would it be?
I think my fluency in French and Spanish.
So what's the most unusual thing that you pack for your trips?
It's always been like a lucky coin of some description, whether it's a penny or a dime, whatnot. It's some sort of lucky coin that I have, and I just throw it in my cosmetic bag, and then for some mystical reason, then I feel like the trip is going to be amazing.
And what's your go-to excuse to politely leave a Zoom meeting?
But yeah, the dog. I blame a lot around here on the dog.
What's your dog's name?
Cara. It's Irish, and it means friend. It means friend in Irish. She's a little black and white Bernedoodle. She follows me around like she's my shadow.
What's the most adventurous thing that you still have on your bucket list?
I am pretty adventurous, so I've done a lot. I think maybe parasailing. I saw a bunch of parasailing, off the back of a boat in Mexico last week, and I thought maybe I'll give that a go.
One app on your phone that you cannot live without?
I think FaceTime. Yeah.
That brings me to an end of the episode, Orlagh. This conversation has been nothing but a masterclass, right? For listeners who will be listening to this, who will be tuning into Discover Dialogues, right? From decoding the dream team of AI, LLM, and quantum computing to redefining what it actually means to be quantum safe and future ready, your clarity, analogies, and energy makes even the complex tech feel human, right? And you've been a fabulous...
Nikhil. Yeah, thank you. I only jumped into quantum 3 years ago, and I'm super grateful that I had a chance to do that at Microsoft, with amazing people. But yeah, so I've learned a ton, and if anything is of use today to your listeners, well, fantastic. I love that.
Any parting words you would like to say before we, stop the recording?
Well, I think curiosity, staying curious is important. Curious about what these new technologies can do, and then, putting your mind to it and just going for it. I think I'd love to see your listeners just checking out, this new dream team, and then just really getting the creative juices flowing as to what scenarios and what use cases they can think about, right? That could potentially be tackled, and then, make a case for that in your organization. Scary, but super rewarding.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Discover Dialogues, Orlagh. It's been a pleasure to have you today.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, or your favorite podcast app. Catch past episodes and more at techdogs.com. See you next time.